On web pages, screen real estate is often at a premium, and designers are always on the search for new techniques to hide and reveal content selectively. This movie will show you how to add a 3D card flip to your content control arsenal. We'll even throw in a JavaScript-powered slide reveal for those browsers that don't support the 3D transforms. Let's start by taking a look at the web page so you can see where we're going. As I hover over each of the paintings, it spins on its y-axis. But instead of showing the painting in reverse, related secondary content is displayed. And when I move off one painting and onto another, the first one reverses its card flip, while the second one flips over. So as you move around, you get a nice little card flip dance going on. Now, if we take a look at the page in a non-supporting browser, you'll see the same content, but instead of a 3D flip, you get a 2D slide. How's that for graceful degradation? Let me show you how it's all done. I've opened the about.html file from Chapter 4, 0402 About folder in my code editor. Starting in the head area, you can see I have 3 JavaScript files I want to draw your attention to, beginning on line 15. The first brings in the latest version of the popular jQuery library. Next, we include a jQuery-based easing library to smooth out our non-CSS transitions. And finally, I've linked in the most recent version of Modernizer, which we'll use to detect whether browsers can support CSS 3D transforms. Browsers that can will get one set of classes added to specific div tags that will flip the initial content away and flip in the secondary content, while browsers that don't support CSS 3D transforms will have the content animated from the bottom up. So right below those 3 includes, I have a script tag that contains the functionality that handles this code swapping. Let me scroll down just a bit. The opening statement on line 20, if HTML has class CSS transforms 3D, checks to see if the browser supports the property, and if so, it removes the class slide, as you see on line 21, and substitutes flip. Then, if the selector with the flip class is hovered over, it toggles between adding the class the flip and removing it. Now, if the browser does not support the CSS transforms 3D property, the function that starts on line 31 kicks in. Here, the slide class is left in place, and a slide up animation is toggled on and off. Now, before we get to the CSS, I want to show you the HTML structure of each of the artworks. So let's scroll on down. I'll go down to around line 76 or so. And the div with the ID of the art is where there's the group of 4 slides. For each slide, both the image and its description are nested under a div with the class of art group and the default class of slide. The code for the image, like that found on line 78, is placed in front of the div with a class of details, line 79, that contains the image information. We're ready to tackle the CSS necessary for both the 3D transform and the sliding animation for older browsers. Let's switch over to transitions.css. That's found in the _CSS folder. And I'll scroll down to the bottom, create a few empty lines to bring our code up. Let's enter in the CSS rules we'll need for the older browsers first. And I'm just going to put in a little comment here. The first one is the class of art group with another class of slide. And all we need to add here is the property overflow set to hidden. Now we need to create a class that positions the detail content so that it's out of view. So again, we'll target art group, slide, and then within that, the class of detail. All of my images are the same size, so I can use one value here. So let's set bottom to -364 pixels. Okay, that's all we need to do for the older browsers. So for newer browsers, that's the main event. Let's add the CSS necessary to make the card flip happen. In all, we'll need just 4 rules. First, since this is a 3D value we're working with, let's set up our 3D by adding a perspective attribute to the general image and details container, which is called art group, that has the class of flip. This will ensure that the children of this div will exist in the 3D space. And we'll start with the WebKit perspective property. Let's set it to a value of 800 pixels. It's kind of a medium value that should ensure no distortion. And now I'm going to copy my WebKit perspective value, paste it in 3 times, get rid of that extra space I put in there by mistake. And let's change the second entry of WebKit to Mozilla, M-O-Z, the third one to O for Opera, and let's get rid of it for the fourth one altogether. Perspective is done. Next, we want to target that child, which is the class artwork, and set up the transition for the transform property with a brief duration. Again, I'll enter the selector art group flip. And now we'll do the second class we want to target, which is artwork. And this is the individual paintings. First, we'll set up our transition for the transform property. And as always, we'll start with WebKit. Name the property we want to transition, which is transform. But of course, since this line is vendor specific, we have to add in that prefix as well. So WebKit again, transform, and the duration of 1 second. We'll leave off the timing function, and that will revert to using the default value, which is ease. Okay, let me copy and paste our transition statement, make the necessary changes, and that section is done. Next, because perspective on the parent element only pertains to the direct children, which here is the class of artwork, we want to use the transform style property set to preserve 3D to pass that perspective along to the next level of children, which will be the image and the details. I'll give it a little air here just to make it clear what we're doing. So we'll enter in WebKit-transform style. And set that to its value of preserve-3D. Okay, that is eminently copyable and equally replaceable. So let's make those alterations. And now that bit of code is done. Now let's add in the actual 3D transform using the rotate Y property, set to spin 180 degrees in a right to left direction. That would be a negative direction. We'll specify 2 selectors, one for each face of the card. First, we'll do the detail, and now we'll add in the image itself. So let's enter in our transform rotate Y property, starting with the WebKit version. And we want this to go negative 180 degrees. I'll do my copy-paste routine. Finally, we need to make sure that when the card is flipped, the other side does not show through. For that, we'll add the backface visibility property with a value of hidden. And this goes onto a rule targeting the image and the detail. So WebKit-backface-visibility :hidden. Select, copy, paste. And changing those prefixes one more time. I'm going to save the file now, and then let's go take a look at it in the browser. So here I have opened the about.html file, and when you first look at it, before I refresh the page, you see the details showing up, and that's because we didn't have the opacity in place. So let's reload the page. And there's my images. And when I rotate over them, they flip beautifully. Now, let's go over to Firefox, which this version does not support 3D transforms. And now when I roll over the paintings, I'm getting the 2D sliding action instead of the 3D rotation, but it still looks good and the content's still visible. So now you've got another rather snazzy tool that you can use in your designs to hide and show supplementary content at will, courtesy of 3D transforms and just a little bit of JavaScript.